Hi, it's Dwyer. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. It is Sunday afternoon, March 27th, 2022. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, before I get to the George Kambosos versus Devin Haney fight, let's just quickly talk about some recent developments in boxing. I need to have people understand that some interesting fighters are lining up to take on the winner of Jermell Charlo versus Brian Castano, because that would be a rare opportunity to fight for the undisputed title in a weight class. Now, some of the news I've heard is disheartening. Errol Spence trains with Jermell Charlo, right? Errol Spence now is talking about, if he beats Ugas, trying to get a fight with Charlo. Fortunately, Charlo has vowed never to fight his training mate, right? They have the same trainer. Let's just say Charlo sees Spence as a brother. And just like the Klitschko brothers never fought each other professionally, Charlo's just flatly refusing to fight Spence. Let's feel grateful for that. Because I need to have people understand, while we talk about Spence in the same sentence with Terence Crawford, he doesn't belong in the same sentence. I don't care what he did as an amateur, because Terence Crawford was undisputed at 140 pounds. Right? Crawford now is saying, look, if I don't get a fight with the winner of Spence Ugas, and for the record, I'm taking the underdog in that. In fact, that's a theme of upcoming fights. I believe 2022 is going to have some shocking surprises. Right? I like Ugas over Spence. Right? Eye problems. Sorry, that concerns me. Right? I like Bivol over Canelo. Right, folks? Bivol has fought some very heavy-handed guys, including his last opponent. Keep in mind, he's already beaten Joe Smith at light heavyweight. Folks need to wake up. Canelo, as big a puncher as he is, I'm not convinced, can show up at this hard-hitting light heavyweight division and actually dominate guys. 175 is not 168. Right? Well, let's just say that Crawford now is saying he wants, if he doesn't get the winner of Spence Ugas, he wants the winner of Charlo Castano. Let's hope, if Errol Spence wakes up and starts respecting boxing history, understand, he owes the fans this. If he beats Ugas, the proper move would be for him to fight Crawford. If you can't agree on money, right, rely on the pay-per-view. Right? Set it up where maybe one guy gets a few more guarantees than the other guy, but if the fight's a success, the other guy gets paid. But understand, Crawford is like Alexander Usyk, right? A guy who was undisputed at cruiserweight, who is now trying to be undisputed at heavyweight. Right? The fighters who don't accept the challenge are chumps. Crawford, who belongs in a league of his own, opens the door to the possibility of a fighter being undisputed at 140, he's done it, then becoming undisputed at 147 if the Spence Ugas winner plays ball, and then undisputed at 154 if Charlo Castano play ball. Right? So I hope the boxing public pressures Spence. It's a farce. This only happens in boxing. That we've waited this long for Crawford against Spence. Let me just say, if I'm Al Heyman, for the reputation of my organization, I would tell Spence, hey, player, forget about 154. You have one more fight at 147. Let's also open the door to another possibility, and it's one you need to think about. Ugas, who I think beat Spence, already has beaten Manny Pacquiao. If he beats Spence, I get the feeling Ugas almost certainly, if the fight is uncontroversial, if it's controversial, they'll have a rematch. We'll be waiting several months. If it's controversial, just hope no one gets cut, because cuts will delay the next fight. Right? But if Ugas beats Spence and it's uncontroversial, I'm hoping Ugas pivots, and I believe he will, based on personality, to fight Crawford. Because understand, both guys are in their 30s. If you're going to dare history, if you're going to do the right thing, I believe and Ugas should realize that the right thing has to be to give the man who's already undisputed at 140 a chance to see if he can be undisputed at 147. To the fighters, I say, don't rob us. Don't play games with us. Right? Because if the winner of Spence Ugas then decides, hey, I'm going to fight this other guy, right? The fans should be outraged. Let me continue. I was online and I saw there was a buzz. This is even before the formal fight was announced. For the George Kambosos, Devin Haney fight. Then I looked up the lines. And to my utter amazement, and I was shocked at this. Shocked. Kambosos in Australia is the underdog. That's according to Odds Checker. Now I'm hoping my casinos post the fight so I can put some quick money down on Kambosos. Folks need to understand the important role that the host country plays. It's very important, especially here. Now, Australia is actually a sponsor of the fight. I'm talking about the government. They're throwing money at it. Right? I'm just telling you, as someone who was born in Kingston, Jamaica, who would watch the Olympics with my parents, and we'd be cheering if a Jamaican was even in the running for the bronze. Right? The guys who had Jamaican roots, who left the country years ago to fight for Canada, to fight for the United Kingdom, guys like Lennox Lewis. I'm just telling you, Jamaican people are acutely aware of the guys who have Jamaican roots. Right? Acutely aware. You don't think that Australia isn't going to come out in force for George Kambosos? You don't think that this fight isn't going to be about Australia's boxing identity? Right, folks, I'm just telling you, the crowd is going to be solidly for George Kambosos. Solidly for him. Now, between these two fighters, I believe the fight style is going to determine who wins the fight. Devin Haney, can we agree? If you don't agree with me, tell us about it in the comment section, right? It's not all about me. We're a community here. Devin Haney doesn't have a big punch. That's just reality. Devin Haney in Australia, where, of course, Jeff Horn beat Manny Pacquiao. right? You know the image Australians have of themselves. It's a Crocodile Dundee image, right? You know, they talk about going out back and, you know, it's rough and tumble, right? That's the image. They want action. You mean to tell me that without a big punch, Devin Haney on his back foot against the guy who's a hunter, who has ring coverage, who's gonna be aggressive, you're telling me that Devin Haney on his back foot is gonna get what? A decision in Australia? Am I the only one who thinks that that's almost absurd? In other words, for Devin Haney to win this fight, he's going to have to land some hard shots. He's going to have to stand up Kambosos. He's going to have to carve him up. It's going to have to be a fight where you understand you're watching a masterpiece. Now, Devin Haney's style works well against guys who are passive, who stand there in the pocket, and Devin Haney jumps in the pocket, is able to throw some shots. Then he's outside the pocket. Then he's roaming around. Think the early rounds against Jorge Linares, where Linares is really standing around and Devin Haney is like a butterfly coming to a flower, right? He jumps in, then he jumps back out. He jumps in, then he jumps back out. What happens if Kambosos starts following him? Which you know he's going to do. What happens if Kambosos cuts off the angles? I want to encourage people here to look at the film of Kambosos against Lee Selby. Now understand, Lee Selby has some of the best legs in boxing. Right? Selby knows how to move, just like Devin Haney. Kambosos, against a guy with great legs who knew how to move, is continually following Selby around the ring. He makes it hard for Selby to escape. Now, my point to you is, if Kambosos is aggressive, he's on his front foot in front of a home crowd, and Haney doesn't stop to exchange, right? There isn't a spirited series of punches from Haney where Haney goes blood and guts and tries to hurt Kambosos. If Haney tries to win the fight just by being a back foot artist, I don't think he's going to get the benefit of the doubt. So you've got to be kidding me. I get almost 2-1 odds right now on George Kambosos. Understand, too, the fight is for the Undisputed title at 135. Right? Undisputed. So there's going to be a feeling that you need to win the fight. Right? Someone has got to do something. The guy who's trying to do something, in my opinion, is going to be Kambosos. Let me say this too, and I know it's an unpopular position. The best opponent either guy has beaten, in my opinion, was Teofimo Lopez. Right, folks? Lopez beat Lomachenko, for crying out loud. Lopez is still a young man in his prime. Lopez is a prime counterpuncher. Now, we all understand that COVID changed everyone's schedule, that fighters who live in the gym really weren't allowed to live life as they usually do because of lockdowns, restrictions, public paranoia, etc. Right? Keep in mind, too, the guys are young, the fighters are young, but some of the guys around them, trainers, etc., are older. Right? Teofimo is with his dad, who's older. Right? The older age impacts, during a pandemic, the work the younger fighter does, because the people around him might say, hey, player, look, I'm not risking my life to have you spar today. Right? Let's just call it what it is. So Teofimo's defense didn't look remotely as good as it did against Lomachenko. But still, revisit the first round. Revisit Teofimo coming out and trying to hunt down Kambosos. Kambosos drops him off a nice long right hand. Right now, folks, it's my belief that dealing with an aggressive Teofimo Lopez, which is what Kambosos had to do early on, until he landed enough counters to dissuade Teofimo from being aggressive. Right? It wasn't until Teofimo hits the canvas, gets off the canvas, and continues to get hit with counters that Teofimo decides to dial back what he's doing a little bit. I would say dealing with an aggressive Teofimo Lopez, master counterpuncher, hunter, power, more power than Devin Haney, is more difficult than dealing with Devin Haney. Right, so, as much as I admire Devin Haney, and he does have some of the best legs in boxing, he is shutting out Jorge Linares pretty much, until he gets badly dazed at the end of a round late in that fight. Right, Devin Haney's a major talent. I'm just not sure if a guy on his back foot can win a fight on his back foot of this magnitude in Australia against an Australian hero. And make no mistake, that's who George Kambosos is. Right? I think people who come from the United States don't understand the importance of titles to people from smaller countries. Right? I could tell you, I was watching the Olympics, and a Jamaican guy in a track event, this is years before Merlin Ottey and Usain Bolt, right? A Jamaican guy got, I think, the bronze or something in some race. And we were jumping up and down in the living room. I went outside. I had some West Indian friends. I went outside. Everyone knew about the fact that a Jamaican guy got the bronze. In fact, I can tell you, there was a time where I was talking with another Jamaican, and we were all excited about a fight involving a Jamaican guy named Shrimpy Clark. Right? And I'm sure nobody else knew who Shrimpy Clark was. He was a prominent Jamaican fighter. So everyone in Australia is going to know that George Kambosos is putting his titles on the line against Devin Haney, and that Kambosos on his home soil is going to be the underdog. Right? Let me tell you something. If you want to figure out Australia, look at the Jeff Horn-Tim Tszyu fight. Talk about rough and tumble. As you watch that, you're going to think to yourself, is this a wrestling match or is this a boxing match? Right? The guys are leaning on each other. Guys are hitting each other behind the head. Their elbows involved. You know, people in Australia are expecting the fight to get rough and tumble. Devin Haney is simply not a rough and tumble fighter. He's just not. So, if you're going to give me better than even money odds on George Kambosos, no need to put a bow on the package. I'll take it. I like Kambosos straight up to win the fight. Give me all 12 rounds plus a decision. I like Kambosos to win the fight. I'll hedge the play with the over. Right? Kambosos has to look at the way Devin Haney staggered back to his corner after getting hit by Jorge Linares. Now, Linares can punch. Linares dropped Lomachenko, who got off the canvas and then was able to finish the fight, right? Was able to finish Linares, rather, right? Linares can punch. But all I'm saying is, we really don't know how good a punch Devin Haney can take, do we? We know when Linares landed on him, Devin Haney was lucky. It was the end of the round. He was lucky, folks. Right? So I think Devin Haney is going to try to win the fight on his back foot with volume. Understand, against a guy with Kambosos' ring coverage, that's a problem. In other words, as Haney backs up, Kambosos can throw long punches with power. Just look at the punch that puts down Teofimo Lopez. Right? I also think, too, that this is one of those fights where the crowd is going to say, hey, who's more aggressive? Right? The more aggressive fighter is going to be rewarded on the judges' scorecards. That almost certainly is going to be Kambosos. Let me also point out, too, that he beat Lee Selby. Understand, Kambosos has already been in against a mover with great legs. Right? Hiding behind a jab, which is what Selby does. I don't believe Devin Haney is going to surprise him. So I'm expecting an upset in this fight. I also don't think that Devin Haney is going to be able to hurt Kambosos in the early rounds, in part because I think the situation of being in a different hemisphere, in front of a Australian crowd rooting for a home country guy, is going to be a bit overwhelming for Devin Haney, and I think Devin is a cautious fighter who's been a bit protected. Right? He hasn't fought Teofimo Lopez. Right? He hasn't. He's been placed against older fighters. Right? Jorge Linares. Didn't he also fight Gamboa? Right? He's been carefully matched. This time he's in against a guy with ring coverage who's in his 20s, who's aggressive. We'll all be shocked if you're watching the early part of this fight and George Kambosos is not throwing punches, or he's on his back foot. You know that's not the fight you're going to see. You're going to see Kambosos welcoming exchanges, wanting to land punches, wanting to trade, wanting to let his hands go. And the crowd is going to go wild. I like the underdog in this fight, George Kambosos. Right? Understand, though, that I'm someone here who believes underdogs have more of a chance than the public does. Since, of course, I like Bivol against Canelo. Right? Since, of course, I like Ugas against Errol Spence. In other words, some of the best in boxing. Well, here, I'm getting the home crowd. I get the feeling casual gamblers don't know where this fight's taking place. So the line right now is the kind of line you would expect if the fight was on American soil in some place where Devin Haney is popular. No, folks, the fight is in Australia. This is going to be an event. The crowd is going to be out. And they're going to be rooting for the home country guy. I'm guessing right now most Australians know when this fight is taking place. Devin Haney just doesn't have the punch to take the crowd out of it early. Right? You're not going to see Kambosos on the canvas like Teofimo Lopez was against Kambosos early, where the crowd suddenly thinks to themselves, oh man, our guy's getting embarrassed. I don't think that happens. I think Haney's going to be on his back foot, but he doesn't have the pop. Ali used to have a saying, float like a butterfly, sting like a bee. Haney, to me, is too cautious. He doesn't sting like a bee. I'll be stunned if he lets his hands go early against this level of opponent. I like Kambosos. I'll hedge the play with the over because I believe for Devin Haney to win, this fight is going to take some rounds. Right? Understand, too, Manny Pacquiao felt so mugged in his fight against Jeff Horn that he and his longtime trainer, Freddie Roach, actually had issues after the fight. Right? You remember there was a while there where Freddie didn't really know what was going on with Manny. I believe Manny had somebody else in his corner, right? Some member of his entourage or something in his corner for a fight. Right? Manny couldn't believe that the referee was allowing Jeff Horn to push him around. Right? Have elbows. Try to muscle him. Toss him around. Manny was out. Manny expected the guy in his corner, Freddie Roach, to object. Well, understand, if you know Jeff Horn, who, by the way, Crawford beat by stoppage, you need to look at that fight to understand Terrence Crawford's greatness. But understand, Jeff Horn is like that every fight. Look at the Tim Tszyu fight. Right? Understand, Australians don't blink when they're watching a fight and let's just say a fighter's being rough and tumble. That's their interpretation of the sport. Right? The heroes are guys like Jeff Fennick over there. So yeah, I get the feeling Devin Haney is going to run into a guy who's going to make him look like Haney's running away from him. I don't think a back foot strategy is going to work. I have seen Haney against lesser fighters come in and, throw a lot of punches and really hurt guys. But understand, Linares goes the distance with him. Look up Linares' interviews after the fight. Linares makes it sound like Haney can't punch. Right? That's a fight where Linares loses most of the rounds. And Linares was unimpressed with Haney's punching power. If you don't have pop, and we know Teofimo Lopez has pop, if you don't have pop, how are you going to discourage George Kambosos from coming forward? I like Kambosos. I'll hedge the play with the over. Let me know what you think. I hope you leave your comments, whether you agree with me or not. Right? I'm picking the underdog after all. Leave your comments in the comment section of this video. Thanks for stopping by.